This is your York Region real estate market update. Something that I do want to mention is that when you see real estate headlines being reported in the news, it's important to know that those numbers come from the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. And that data covers a wide area, not just Toronto. In fact, it includes areas like York Region, as well as Durham Region, Peel, Halton, Simcoe County, and Dufferin. So average prices are down almost 6% year over year in York Region, but inventory levels have also been declining in the last couple of months, which is shifting the months of inventory and creating some interesting changes within our marketplace. My name is Alice Prince. I'm a real estate broker here in York Region. I help many buyers and sellers make sense of today's market, really cutting through the noise and focusing on what really matters. So whether you're thinking about making a move or maybe you just kind of want to stay informed in what's happening in our market, my goal is to give you a clear perspective backed by real numbers and meaningful insights. So if you find this video helpful, do not forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss the next update, and it really helps this little channel grow. And if you're planning a move in the next 3, 6, or even 12 months and you just kind of want some guidance, there's a link in the description below where you can book a call to chat, and I would love to meet you. So in today's video, we're going to be covering a lot of ground, and if you know me, you know that I'm going to be bringing the receipts. Because let's be honest, there's nothing worse than someone telling you what's happening in the market rather than showing you. So we'll start with a quick year-over-year snapshot, then break down what's unfolded so far throughout 2025, and then we're going to zoom out to see how things have evolved over the last 5 years, just to give you some perspective, and wrap up with a city-by-city look at how each area is performing. So if you want a real picture, not just the headlines, stay tuned because these graphs are going to tell you a story that you'll definitely want to see. Okay guys, I'm just going to jump right into it here. Let's start off by looking at the year-over-year summary. So in York Region, we saw 1,050 home sales in October, and that is down about 10% compared to the same time last year, which basically translates to 118 less homes sold in that month. New listings are up 7.5% with just over 3,000 homes hitting the market within that month. Active listings are continuing to stack up and are 17% higher than last October, which means buyers are seeing more and more choice. Now, something to keep into perspective is real estate is very much a supply and demand industry. And so with 17% more homes noted for sale, homes are still selling. However, they're not being purchased fast enough as newer inventory comes onto the market. And so not only is this creating more competition among sellers, we're also seeing active listings continue to pile up. The average price in York Region sits at just over 1.23 million, which is down almost 6% from 2024. And this is showing that prices have softened as supply builds. Now, when it comes to time on the market, homes are taking a little bit longer to sell. We've all felt this. And the average days on market is now 32 days, which is up 14% from last October. With 5.1 months of inventory, we're on the upper end of a balanced market territory, because if this number was 6 or higher, we would be considered to be in a buyer's market. Now, lastly here, the list to sale price ratio has dipped slightly from 99% to 97%, which means buyers on average are negotiating about 3% less than list price. And sales to new listings ratio dropped from 40% to 33%, which basically translates to, think about it this way, for every 10 homes that come onto the market right now, only 3 are selling in that first 30 days versus 4 out of 10. Overall, we are seeing a market that is cooling and rebalancing with lots of listings, longer selling times, and slightly lower prices. It's giving buyers more breathing room and setting the stage as we kind of move on into the new year of a balanced market. All right, so let's quickly shift our focus to how 2025 has actually played out so far. Now, on the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to see the graphs that are showing average prices, sales, and active listings throughout the year. Now, I always love looking at the market from this kind of bird's eye view because it really helps bring the story to life. And if you're a visual person like me, these trends become so much more clear. Home prices in January started at about 1.196 million, and then they peaked in April at 1.264 million during that spring sluggish market that we were experiencing. Then from May through July, prices held steady around 1.22 to 1.26 million. But from May through July, prices held steady at around 1.22 to 1.26. But by August and September, they slipped slightly to roughly 1.8 million before inching back up to 1.228 in October. This means that prices have stayed within this fairly tight range overall, but obviously the momentum has shifted downward since spring. Now, from a seller's perspective, this means that strategy matters more than ever. Homes that are priced right and well presented, they're still moving, but those that are priced too high or those that are just kind of trying to test the market are sitting longer. We're also noticing that home sellers who try to play this offer date game, they are often failing because they're not getting the prices that they want. Sellers need to be realistic about today's market conditions because while demand is still there, buyers are being far more selective. The good news is that sellers who adapt quickly are still seeing strong results, especially in neighborhoods where inventory does remain tight. Now, sales activity has been steady, but obviously not accelerating, climbing from 636 homes in January to just over 1,000 a month through the spring and holding steady at that pace into the fall. It's clear that buyers are still active, just way more selective. Now, the biggest shift that we've seen this year has definitely come from inventory. Now, at the start of the year of 2025, there was around 3,300 homes for sale, but by June and July, that number had reached to 6,200, nearly doubling in 6 months, which is obviously a huge jump. Since August, active listings have started to come down gradually, but they're still sitting high, sitting at roughly 5,800 homes for sale. So in other words, there's plenty of fish in the sea. So in other words, there's plenty of choice out there, and in most areas, supply is outpacing demand. Prices, although they have softened a little bit from the spring, they are still actually up about 2.7% since January. Demand has been steady, obviously not as strong in previous years, but consistent enough to keep the market moving. So I just want to show you this graph that illustrates average sale prices from January 2022 to today because I think it really gives a clear picture on how prices have behaved over the last couple of years. After the peak in early of 2022, prices adjusted and have mostly hovered within this shaded red zone for quite some time. And you can see that in September, we dipped slightly below that range for the first time in a while, but October's seen a little uptick in prices, putting us back into that zone. Now, this could be a slow reaction to inventory levels coming down from their highs, which often puts some upward pressure on prices. However, I'm not saying that prices are about to take off here as less homes become available for sale, but it is a good reminder that even small shifts in supply can influence trends overall. That said, overall, technically, we're still kind of in this zone. The over market has obviously slowed compared to this time last year. Overall, this reflects the broader transition that we're seeing as the market continues to normalize post-COVID while battling all these crazy new changes that we're facing within our economy. Now, it's no secret that obviously inventory has been climbing over the past few years and even more so this year. But I did want to show you this chart because it gives a good bird's eye view of how that has been playing out. Real estate, as I mentioned, is such a fluid industry when it comes to sales and listings, and a big part of that conversation lately has been about how much inventory we've had on the market. You can see here that inventory really peaked around May through July, and since then it's been slowly trending downward. Now, there could be a few reasons why this is happening. One is that some sellers just aren't getting the price that they need to make it to their next move, so they're pulling off their listings. Another factor is seasonality. A lot of people decide to put a pause on things and to relist in the spring. And finally, some sellers may just simply be waiting for the market to kind of catch up to what they're expecting and for the market to shift a little bit more into their favor. Now, when you look back over the last few years, you can see this pattern of ups and downs, but the overall trend has definitely been upward. It's a reminder that inventory levels have been steadily building over time, even though we're seeing some short-term fluctuations right now. And so for prices to sort of have any substantial increase, we're going to either have to see less homes on the market or more sales. So looking at the sales volume trend across York Region from 2022 through 2025, you can see a really consistent seasonal pattern year after year. Even with all the shifts in interest rates, the broader economic changes, the rhythm of the market has stayed pretty steady. Activity tends to peak in the spring and then slow down through the late summer and winter months. Homes are still selling and very much in line with the usual seasonal patterns that we see. And you can see here that in October, sales in 2025 are actually higher than both in October of 2022 and 2023. And the reason it might feel like nothing is selling is because there's simply more choice out there right now. It's kind of like walking into a restaurant with a huge menu. The food's still being served, but it takes people longer to decide what they want. In the same way, it's like buyers today, right? They have more options, so homes are sitting a little bit longer, but the activity is still happening, just spread out across a larger selection. Okay, so lastly, just before we wrap up here, let's take a quick look at how each city in York Region is behaving. Here's a look at the average home prices across York Region for October of 2025. Starting at the top, King continues to lead the region with an average price of about $2.17 million. Richmond Hill and Aurora are next, sitting at $1.34 and $1.3 million. And followed closely by Stouffville, sitting at $1.29 million. Vaughan and Markham are just both over that $1.2 million mark, while East Gwillimbury and Newmarket are just under that, averaging about 1.19 to 1.02 million. And finally, Georgina remains the most affordable market in the York Region with an average price of about $825,000. Overall, pricing in York continues to show that steady mix. Higher end markets like King are holding strong, while more accessible areas like Georgina and Newmarket they really offer a little bit more of an entry-level opportunity. So when it comes to home sales, Markham and Vaughan led the way again this month with 287 and 233 sales respectively, showing continuing strong demand in those larger markets. Richmond Hill saw just over 170, and Newmarket and Aurora saw 73 and 65 sales happen. Georgina and Stouffville were just under that at 59 and 56, and East Gwillimbury and King had the fewest transactions, sitting at 30 and 24. Now here's a look at the number of active listings across York Region. Vaughan has the highest amount of inventory this month with around 1,495 active listings for sale, followed closely by Markham with just over 1,200 and Richmond Hill with just over 1,100. Georgina has a relatively high number at 390, while Aurora, Newmarket, and Stouffville sit in that mid-range between 300 and 350. King City and East Gwillimbury have fewer with 272 and 262 listings, and Georgina Island remains the smallest market with just 8 active listings for sale. So overall, inventory levels are still elevated across much of York Region, which gives buyers more options to choose from and explains why the market may feel a little bit slower even though homes are still selling. Prices have been holding relatively steady within the same range we've seen since post-2022. Now sales are following their usual seasonal patterns, and inventory levels have been higher this year. We're starting to see that somewhat trend down from the peak. Altogether, it does point to a market that's still active, stable, just more balanced than that frenzy that we've seen a couple years ago. I know you've been hearing that buyers have more choice and that sellers need to be more strategic, but overall the market continues to find its rhythm. So if you're thinking about buying or selling in York Region and you're not quite sure how these trends affect your plans, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to walk you through your specific situation. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on your next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao!